Oakland, 1951. A story that will haunt you. A mystery that spans 7 decades. A truth so impossible, you'll question everything you know about missing persons cases. This is not just another cold case. This is the story of how one moment of distraction changed a family forever, and how the unthinkable became reality 73 years later. Picture this. A sunny afternoon in California, 2 brothers playing in a park, laughter filling the air. And then, in the blink of an eye, one of them is gone. Vanished. As if he never existed. For 73 years, a family refuses to give up hope. For 73 years, they search for answers that seem impossible to find. And then, in 2024, a simple DNA test reveals something that defies all logic, all probability, all expectation. The missing boy is alive. This is the extraordinary true story of Luis Albino, a 6-year-old child stolen in broad daylight and found living a completely different life 7 decades later. How did this happen? Who took him? And how did a case everyone assumed was unsolvable finally crack wide open? Stay with me as we dive deep into one of the most astonishing cold cases in American history. Welcome to Untold Case Desk. Before we begin, if you love diving deep into real unsolved mysteries and unbelievable true crime stories, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. And make sure you're subscribed to Untold Case Desk with notifications turned on, because you won't want to miss a single story we cover here. Trust me, this case is going to blow your mind. Now, let's get into it. West Oakland, California, February 21st, 1951. It's a Wednesday afternoon, mild and pleasant, the kind of day that makes you forget winter ever happened. The sun is warm, but not hot. A gentle breeze carries the sounds of children's laughter through the neighborhood. In a small park on Brush Street, kids are running wild with that boundless energy only children possess. They're playing tag, climbing on monkey bars, swinging as high as they can go, challenging each other to jump from the swings mid-flight. It's a scene of pure, innocent joy. Among these children are 2 brothers who chase each other across the grass, their faces flushed with excitement and exertion. 6-year-old Luis Albino and his 10-year-old brother Roger are recent arrivals to this West Oakland neighborhood. Their laughter blends with the cacophony of other children's voices, creating a symphony of childhood that has echoed through parks like this for generations. For these 2 boys, this afternoon feels like any other. They have no idea that their lives are about to be torn apart in a way that will haunt their family for the next 73 years. To understand this story, we need to understand the context of the Albino family's life in 1951. Just 1 year earlier, the Albino family had made the difficult decision to leave Puerto Rico and move to the mainland United States. Like thousands of other Puerto Rican families during this era, they came searching for opportunities, for a better life, for the American dream that seemed within reach in the post-war boom years. America in 1951 is experiencing unprecedented prosperity. World War II has been over for 6 years. Soldiers have returned home. The economy is booming. Manufacturing is at an all-time high. Suburbs are sprouting up around every major city. Television is becoming a fixture in American homes. The future looks bright, optimistic, full of possibility. For immigrant families like the Albinos, this is the land of opportunity they've heard about, the place where hard work can transform your life. But that transition isn't easy. The Albino family faces challenges that many immigrant families encounter. There's the language barrier. At home, the family speaks Spanish. It's their native tongue, the language of their memories, their culture, their identity. But out in the world, English dominates. Luis and Roger are learning English at school, picking it up the way children do, with a remarkable adaptability that adults often envy. Still, there are moments of confusion, times when the language barrier makes simple things complicated. There's also the cultural adjustment. Oakland is vastly different from Puerto Rico. The weather, the food, the customs, the way people interact. Everything feels foreign. The Albino children are caught between two worlds, trying to honor their heritage while also fitting in with their peers. At school, they might feel different. At home, their parents try to maintain the traditions and values they brought from the island. Their mother, Antonia Albino, works tirelessly to provide for her children. Life is not easy for her. As a Puerto Rican woman in 1950s California, she faces barriers and prejudices that make every day a struggle. But she's determined, resilient, fueled by a mother's love and a fierce desire to give her children better opportunities than she had. She sets rules and expects them to be followed. One of those rules is simple but strict. Her boys must be home before dark. This rule isn't arbitrary. It comes from a place of love and concern. Antonia knows that the world can be dangerous, even if she can't imagine just how dangerous it's about to prove. She trusts her oldest son, Roger, to be responsible, to watch out for his younger brother. At 10 years old, Roger is old enough to understand this responsibility, and he takes it seriously. He's protective of Luis, always keeping him within sight, making sure he doesn't wander too far or get into trouble. On this particular Wednesday afternoon in February, the brothers have asked permission to go to the park on Brush Street. It's a place they've been to before, a safe neighborhood spot where children gather. Antonia agrees, reminding them to be home before dinner, reminding them to stay together, reminding them to be careful. The boys promise they will. They have every intention of keeping that promise. Luis is small for his age, a petite boy with dark hair that falls across his forehead and eyes that sparkle with curiosity and mischief. He has an infectious smile, the kind that makes everyone around him smile too. At 6 years old, he's at that magical age where the world is full of wonder. Everything is an adventure. A pile of sand becomes a construction site. A stick becomes a sword. His imagination knows no bounds. He idolizes his big brother Roger. To Luis, Roger is everything he wants to be. Strong, brave, smart, capable. He follows Roger around like a shadow, mimicking his actions, seeking his approval. And Roger, for his part, feels a deep sense of responsibility for his little brother. It's not just that their mother has told him to watch out for Luis. Roger genuinely loves his brother. He wants to protect him, to keep him safe, to make sure nothing bad ever happens to him. At the park on this mild February afternoon, Roger does exactly what his mother asked. He keeps Luis in sight while still allowing him the freedom to play. Luis is happily digging in the sandbox, his small hands working to create an elaborate castle with roads and walls and towers. He's completely absorbed in his creation, talking to himself in a mixture of Spanish and English, narrating the story of the imaginary world he's building. Roger is nearby, playing with some other boys who have challenged him to a game of tag. He's fast, faster than most of the other kids, and he enjoys the competition. But even as he runs and laughs and dodges the outstretched hands of his pursuers, he glances over at Luis every few minutes, just checking, making sure, being the responsible big brother their mother trusts him to be. The afternoon wears on. The sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the park. The quality of the light changes, becoming softer, more golden. It's that magical time of day photographers call the golden hour. But for children playing in a park, it means something else. It means their time is running out. It means they'll soon have to head home for dinner. Other children begin to leave. Mothers call out from nearby porches, their voices carrying across the park. Time to come in. Dinner's ready. Let's go. We need to wash up. Reluctant children drag their feet, begging for just 5 more minutes, trying to squeeze every last second of play out of the day. Slowly, the playground empties. The noise level drops. The park that was bustling with activity just an hour ago now has only a handful of children left. Luis and Roger know they should be heading home soon too. Their mother's rule about being home before dark is non-negotiable. They've learned not to test her on this. But the weather is so nice, and they're having such a good time, and just a few more minutes won't hurt, right? Just a little bit longer. They'll head home soon. Just Not quite yet. As the brothers play, neither of them notices the woman who enters the park. She's in her early 30s, dressed neatly but not remarkably. There's nothing about her appearance that would draw attention or raise suspicion. She looks like any other adult you might see in a neighborhood park. Perhaps she's a mother herself. Perhaps she's just passing through. Nothing about her seems threatening or dangerous. But this woman isn't here by accident. She's watching the children with a careful, calculating eye. She's observing who's supervised and who's not. She's looking for an opportunity. She's been planning this, thinking about it, perhaps for days or weeks or even longer. Whatever her motivations, whatever darkness lurks in her heart, she's come to this park with a purpose. She moves slowly, casually, not wanting to draw attention to herself. She watches as parents collect their children and head home. She watches as the crowd thins. And then she sees him, Luis, a small boy, dark-haired, playing alone in the sandbox. His brother is nearby but distracted, engaged in a game with other boys. This is the moment she's been waiting for. The woman approaches Luis with a friendly smile. She's good at this, practiced. Her voice is warm, almost motherly. She knows exactly how to talk to children, how to make them feel comfortable, how to gain their trust. She starts up a conversation, asking Luis simple questions. What's he building? Does he come to this park often? What's his name? Luis, who has been taught to be polite, who has been raised to respect adults, especially women, responds to her questions. In his 6-year-old mind, there's no reason to be suspicious. Adults are trustworthy. Adults are safe. This nice lady is just being friendly. She seems interested in his sandcastle, and he's proud of what he's created. He's happy to tell her about it. The woman says something that captures Luis's attention. We'll never know exactly what words she used. Maybe she mentioned having candy in her car. Maybe she told him about a puppy she wanted to show him. Maybe she said his mother had sent her to pick him up because there was an emergency. Maybe she promised him a toy or a treat. Whatever she said, it was convincing enough to a 6-year-old child who had no reason to doubt her. Luis looks around for Roger. He wants to tell his brother where he's going, or maybe ask if he can come too. But Roger is on the other side of the playground, fully engaged in his game of tag. He's running, laughing, not paying attention to the sandbox at this particular moment. He'll check on Luis again in a minute, like he's been doing all afternoon. Just one more minute. The woman extends her hand to Luis. Her smile is reassuring. She speaks with authority, the kind of voice adults use when they expect to be obeyed. Luis hesitates for just a moment, but then he takes her hand. His small fingers disappear into her grasp. She begins walking, and he walks with her. They move toward the edge of the park, away from the playground equipment, away from the other children, away from Roger. She walks quickly now, purposefully, but not so fast that it would attract attention. To anyone watching, they might look like a mother collecting her child. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. They reach the edge of the park and turn onto a side street. And just like that, they're gone. They've disappeared from view, swallowed up by the neighborhood streets of Oakland. The entire abduction has taken perhaps 5 minutes, maybe less. It happened in broad daylight, in a public park, with other people nearby. And nobody noticed. Nobody stopped it. Nobody saved Luis Albino. Back at the playground, Roger finishes his game of tag. He's breathing hard, his face flushed from the exertion. He wipes the sweat from his forehead and looks over at the sandbox, ready to check on his little brother again. But Luis isn't there. The sandbox is empty. Luis's half-finished castle abandoned. At first, Roger isn't worried. Luis probably just went to a different part of the playground. Maybe he got bored with the sand and went to the swings. Or maybe he's behind the slide. Roger walks over to the swings, expecting to see his brother there. But Luis isn't on the swings. Roger checks behind the slide, around the trees, near the drinking fountain. No, Luis. Roger calls out his brother's name. Luis. Luis, where are you? His voice echoes across the now quiet park. There's no answer. He runs from one end of the playground to the other, his heart starting to beat faster. He checks every possible hiding spot. Behind every tree, under every piece of playground equipment, in every corner where a 6-year-old might hide. Luis isn't anywhere. Roger approaches the few remaining children in the park, other kids he was playing with earlier. "Have you seen my brother?" he asks, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. "A little kid? This tall, dark hair?" The children shake their heads. They haven't seen him. One boy suggests maybe he went home already, but Roger knows that's not possible. Luis wouldn't go home without him. Their mother's instructions were clear. They were to stay together. The cold feeling of dread that started in Roger's stomach is now spreading through his entire body. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong. Luis wouldn't just wander off. He wouldn't leave without telling Roger. And he knows the rule about staying together. Something has happened. Someone has taken him. Roger's mind is racing. How long has it been since he last looked at the sandbox? 5 minutes? 10? 15? He can't remember exactly. He was playing tag, having fun, and he lost track of time. He should have been watching more carefully. He should have been paying attention. His mother trusted him to take care of Luis, and he failed. Tears are streaming down Roger's face now. He's running, his legs pumping as fast as they can carry him toward home. He's calling out for his mother before he even reaches their street. Neighbors turn to look as this 10-year-old boy sprints past them, his face a mask of terror and tears. Something has happened. Something terrible. Roger bursts through the front door of their home, barely able to breathe. "Mama! Mama!" he's shouting. Antonia emerges from the kitchen, alarmed by the panic in her son's voice. The moment she sees Roger's face, she knows. A mother knows. Something has happened to Luis. Roger can barely get the words out between his sobs. They were at the park. He was playing. He looked away for just a 3-minute. And when he looked back, Luis was gone. He searched everywhere. He called his name. But Luis has disappeared. Antonia doesn't waste a single second. She grabs Roger's hand, and they run back toward the park, Antonia calling out Luis's name with every step. By the time they reach the playground, it's nearly empty. The golden light of late afternoon has deepened into the orange glow of early evening. Long shadows stretch across the grass. The park that was full of life and laughter just an hour ago now feels eerie and silent. Antonia runs from one end to the other, checking every possible place her son might be. She calls his name over and over, her voice growing more desperate with each cry. She approaches every person she can find, grabbing them by the arm, forcing them to look at her, to listen to her. "Have you seen a boy? 6 years old. This tall, dark hair, brown eyes. His name is Luis. Please, have you seen him?" Most people shake their heads, their faces sympathetic but unable to help. They haven't seen anything unusual. But then, one woman, an older lady sitting on a bench near the edge of the park, speaks up. She did see something, now that she thinks about it. Earlier, maybe half an hour ago, she saw a young boy walking with a woman. She didn't think anything of it at the time. She assumed it was the boy's mother. They were heading east, toward the main road. The woman was well dressed, not young but not old either, maybe in her 30s. That's all she remembers. Antonia's blood runs cold. She knows in her heart what has happened. Someone has taken her son. Some woman walked into that park and stole her child, and nobody stopped her because everyone assumed she had a right to be walking with that little boy. The nightmare every parent fears but never truly believes will happen to them is now Antonia's reality. As the sun sets over Oakland, casting the city into darkness, Antonia knows she needs help beyond what she can provide on her own. She goes to the Oakland Police Department and reports her son missing. She brings Roger with her, hoping he might remember some detail that could help. At the police station, the response is not what she hoped for. The officers on duty are sympathetic but not particularly alarmed. They've heard stories like this before. Parents come in panicked because their child wandered off, only to have the child turn up a few hours later at a friend's house or at a relative's home. Children get distracted. They lose track of time. They forget to tell their parents where they're going. Usually, it's nothing serious. How long has he been missing? They ask Antonia. A few hours, she tells them. The officers exchange glances. A few hours isn't very long in their experience. He probably just got lost, one of them suggests. Or maybe he went to a friend's house. Have you checked with all his friends? Have you talked to the neighbors? Does he have any relatives in the area he might have gone to visit? Antonia tries to explain that Luis wouldn't do that. He's a good boy, an obedient boy. He knows the rules. He wouldn't wander off without permission. And besides, a witness saw him leaving the park with a woman they didn't recognize. But even this information doesn't seem to inspire the urgency Antonia feels the situation deserves. We have to understand that this is 1951. The systems and protocols we have today for missing children simply don't exist yet. There's no Amber Alert system that can instantly notify the entire region that a child has been abducted. There's no national database of missing children. There's no immediate media coverage that can spread the word within hours. The FBI's role in kidnapping cases is limited. Local police departments handle these cases with their own resources, following their own procedures, working at their own pace. The officers agree to file a missing persons report and to send some patrol cars to search the area. They take down all the information. Luis's full name, his age, his description, what he was wearing that day, where he was last seen. They interview Roger, trying to get more details about the woman who was seen with Luis. But Roger didn't see her. He was playing on the other side of the playground. He can't provide a description. The police search that evening yields nothing. They drive through the neighborhood with their searchlights, checking alleys and vacant lots. They knock on doors, asking if anyone has seen a small boy matching Luis's description. They question people on the street, hoping someone saw something. But there are no leads, no clues, no sign of Luis Albino. As night falls completely, Antonia sits in her home, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything except her missing son. Where is he? Is he scared? Is he calling for her? Is he hurt? The thoughts torment her. She prays, bargaining with God, "Please bring him home safely. I'll do anything. Just bring my baby home." Roger lies in his bed, consumed by guilt. This is his fault. He was supposed to watch Luis. He was supposed to keep him safe. But he got distracted. He was playing and having fun while his little brother was being stolen. How can he ever forgive himself? How can his mother ever forgive him? The weight of this responsibility, this failure, settles onto Roger's 10-year-old shoulders, and it will stay there for the rest of his life. The next day, the police continue their investigation, but without much optimism. They've interviewed everyone they could find who was at the park. The description of the woman is vague. White, early 30s, average height, neatly dressed. That could describe thousands of women in Oakland. Without more specific details, finding her is like searching for a needle in a haystack. They follow standard procedures. They check with hospitals in case Luis was injured and brought in. They contact social services in case he was picked up by someone who thought he was lost. They send his information to surrounding police departments in case he was taken out of the city. But everything comes back negative. It's as if Luis Albino simply vanished into thin air. Antonia refuses to sit and wait. She takes action in every way she knows how. She goes to a local print shop and has flyers made with Luis's photograph. The photo shows a smiling little boy with bright eyes and dark hair, frozen in a moment of happiness that now feels like it came from a different lifetime. Under the photo, the flyer gives all the details: his name, age, description, where and when he was last seen, and a plea for anyone with information to contact the police or the family directly. Antonia distributes these flyers throughout Oakland. She tapes them to telephone poles and storefront windows. She hands them to strangers on the street. She leaves stacks of them at churches, community centers, grocery stores, anywhere people might see them. She asks local businesses to display them prominently. Most people are sympathetic and agree to help. They've seen the news coverage, limited as it is, and they're moved by this mother's desperate search for her child. She goes door to door in her neighborhood and beyond, knocking on every door, ringing every bell. When people answer, she shows them the flyer, asks if they've seen Luis, begs them to keep an eye out, and to tell everyone they know. Some people are kind and promise to help. Others are uncomfortable and want to get rid of her as quickly as possible. But Antonia doesn't care about social niceties or whether she's bothering people. Her son is missing, and she will do whatever it takes to find him. She contacts churches, both Catholic parishes where she might worship and Protestant congregations, asking priests and pastors to mention Luis during services, to ask their congregations to be on the lookout. Most religious leaders are compassionate and agree immediately. They understand the power of their platform, the reach of their communities. If enough people are watching, someone might see something. She reaches out to community organizations, particularly those serving the Puerto Rican and broader Hispanic community in Oakland. These groups rally around her, spreading the word through their networks, organizing search parties, putting pressure on the police to dedicate more resources to finding Luis. There's a sense of collective grief and outrage. One of their own has been taken, and they want answers. The weeks turn into months. Spring arrives, bringing warmer weather and blooming flowers, but there's no spring in Antonia's heart. Every day without Luis is agony. Every morning she wakes up hoping this will be the day he comes home. Every night she goes to bed devastated that he hasn't. She keeps his room exactly as he left it. His toys are still scattered across the floor where he was playing with them the morning he disappeared. His small clothes still hang in the closet. His bed is still made with his favorite blanket. She can't bear to change anything. It would feel like giving up, like accepting that he's not coming back. The police investigation continues, but it's clear that they're running out of leads. They've followed every tip that came in, and all of them led nowhere. They've interviewed dozens of people, and nobody saw anything useful. The woman who took Luis has disappeared completely. If she's smart, and she apparently is, she's left the area entirely. She could be anywhere in California, or she could have crossed state lines into Nevada, Oregon, Arizona, anywhere. And if she's crossed state lines, that makes the investigation exponentially more difficult. Roger tries to return to some semblance of normal life, but nothing feels normal anymore. At school, the other children know what happened. Some are sympathetic. Some are curious. Some avoid him because they don't know what to say. Roger withdraws into himself. He struggles to concentrate on his schoolwork. His grades drop. Teachers try to be understanding, but they don't know how to help him. How do you comfort a child dealing with this kind of trauma? At home, the atmosphere is heavy with grief and worry. Antonia tries to maintain routines for Roger's sake, but her heart isn't in it. Meals are prepared but barely eaten. Conversations are strained. The absence of Luis pervades every moment, every room, every activity. The family is broken, and they don't know if they'll ever be whole again. As months stretch into a year, then 2 years, the nature of the search changes. The initial frantic energy fades, replaced by a grim determination. Antonia continues to search. But she's more systematic now, more strategic. She learns about organizations that help find missing children. She contacts them, shares Luis's information, asks for advice. She learns about other missing children cases and studies how they were solved. She becomes an expert in missing persons investigations out of sheer necessity. She contacts police departments in other cities, asking them to be on the lookout for Luis. She sends his photograph and description to law enforcement agencies up and down California and in neighboring states. She writes letters to newspapers, hoping they'll run stories about Luis that might reach someone who has seen him. Some newspapers cooperate. Most ignore her. Missing children aren't front-page news unless there's a sensational element to the story. And Luis's case, tragic as it is, seems like just another kidnapping in an era where such things happen with disturbing frequency. The 1950s give way to the 1960s. America undergoes massive cultural and social changes. The civil rights movement gains momentum, fighting against the injustices of segregation and discrimination. The Vietnam War begins, and soon the nation is deeply divided over it. Young people rebel against traditional values. Music, fashion, and attitudes transform. The counterculture emerges. Women's rights and gay rights movements begin to organize. It's a decade of upheaval and revolution. But for Antonia Albino, none of these historical events matter. Her world is still frozen in that moment. On February 21st, 1951, every birthday Luis misses is torture. He would have been 7, 8, 9, 10. He would be Roger's age now, then older. What does he look like? Is he tall or short? Does he still have that infectious smile? Does he remember his family? Does he remember his mother's face, her voice, the smell of her cooking? Or has he forgotten everything about his life before that day? Every holiday without Luis is unbearable. Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving. The family goes through the motions. But there's an empty chair at every meal. A missing presence that can't be ignored. Antonia still buys birthday presents for Luis every year, wrapping them carefully and placing them in his room. It's irrational, she knows. He's not there to open them, but she can't stop herself. It's her way of keeping him alive, of refusing to accept that he might be gone forever. Roger grows into adolescence, carrying a burden no teenager should have to carry. He becomes quiet, serious, beyond his years. He doesn't talk much about Luis, but everyone knows he's thinking about him constantly. The guilt hasn't faded. If anything, it's intensified as he's gotten older and understands more fully what happened. He makes a private vow to himself. He will never stop looking for his brother. Someday, somehow, he will find Luis and bring him home. The 1970s arrive. Disco music dominates the airwaves. The Vietnam War finally ends. The Watergate scandal rocks the nation and forces a president to resign. The economy struggles with inflation and energy crises. Technology continues to advance. Computers, still massive and expensive, begin to show their potential. But for the average person, they're still the stuff of science fiction. Antonia is aging. The stress and grief have taken their toll on her body and mind. She's developed health problems. But still, she searches. She contacts new organizations that have formed to help find missing children. She follows news stories about other cases, hoping to learn something that might help with Luis's case. When she hears about a missing child being found, her heart leaps with hope. If they can be found, maybe Luis can be found too. She keeps in touch with the Oakland Police Department, calling regularly to ask if there are any updates. Usually, there aren't. The detective who originally handled the case has long since retired. New officers take over the file, read through the old reports, and shake their heads. Without new leads, there's nothing they can do. The trail has gone completely cold. Whoever took Luis did an excellent job of disappearing. The 1980s bring more changes. Personal computers become affordable and start appearing in homes. MTV launches, changing how people consume music. The Cold War begins to thaw. The Berlin Wall falls. The Soviet Union collapses. But Antonia's personal Cold War, her search for Luis, continues with no end in sight. Roger is an adult now, married with children of his own. He tells his children about their uncle Luis, the little boy who disappeared so many years ago. His children listen to the story with wide eyes, asking questions Roger can't answer. Where is he? Will we ever meet him? Roger doesn't know. He can only hope. Having children of his own has made Roger even more aware of what his mother has been through. Now he understands the depth of a parent's love, the fierce instinct to protect your child, the agony of losing one. He watches his own children play in parks, and his heart clenches with remembered fear. He's protective, maybe overly so. He never lets them out of his sight. His wife sometimes tells him he's too cautious, but she understands why. She knows the story. She knows the trauma he carries. The 1990s arrive with the dawn of the internet age. Information that once took days or weeks to find can now be accessed in seconds. People connect across vast distances through email and chat rooms. The World Wide Web opens up new possibilities for communication and research. And for people searching for missing loved ones, it offers new hope. Antonia, now elderly, isn't computer savvy herself, but Roger helps her navigate this new technology. They search for Luis online, looking at missing persons databases, reading about other cold cases, joining forums where families of missing persons share information and support each other. For the first time, Antonia doesn't feel quite so alone in her search. There are thousands of other families out there going through the same nightmare, holding on to the same desperate hope. DNA testing emerges as a revolutionary tool in criminal investigations and missing persons cases. Cases that seemed absolutely unsolvable are cracked open by genetic evidence. Unidentified bodies are given names. Killers who thought they'd gotten away with murder decades ago are suddenly being arrested based on DNA evidence preserved from old crime scenes. Families who had given up hope are getting closure. Roger reads about these cases with growing excitement. Could DNA help find Luis? But there's a catch. You need DNA to compare. You need either Luis's DNA or DNA from someone he's related to. Roger could provide a sample, and so could other family members. But that only helps if Luis's DNA is in a database somewhere. If he's never been arrested, never had his DNA collected for any reason, then there's nothing to compare it to. Still, it's worth trying. Roger contacts organizations that maintain DNA databases for missing persons. He provides samples from himself and other family members. Now all they can do is wait and hope for a match. The 2000s bring even more technological advancement. Social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram allow people to connect and share information instantly with vast networks. Smartphones put the power of the internet in everyone's pocket. The world feels smaller, more connected than ever before. Roger creates a Facebook page dedicated to finding Luis. He posts the old photos, tells the story, and asks people to share it. To his amazement, the page gains followers. People he's never met are moved by the story and want to help. They share the page with their own networks. Suddenly, Luis's story is reaching thousands of people, then tens of thousands. Maybe someone out there knows something. Maybe someone will recognize that old photo. Maybe, after all these years, a lead will finally surface. But nothing concrete emerges. People express sympathy and promise to keep an eye out. But nobody has seen Luis or knows where he might be. The years continue to pass. 2005, 2010, 2015. Luis has been missing for over 60 years now. If he's still alive, he's in his late 60s or early 70s. He could be anywhere in the world. He could be living under a different name, with a completely different identity, having no idea that he was once Luis Albino from Oakland, California. Antonia is in her 80s now. Her health is failing. She knows she doesn't have much time left, and the thought that she might die without knowing what happened to her son is unbearable. She prays every day for an answer, for closure, for some kind of resolution before she passes. But the answer doesn't come in 2020. The world is thrown into chaos by the COVID-19 pandemic. Life, as everyone knows, it grinds to a halt. People shelter in their homes, afraid of an invisible enemy. Hospitals overflow with patients. The economy crashes. Millions lose their jobs. It's a frightening, uncertain time. And in the midst of this global crisis, Antonia Albino passes away. She's 92 years old. She dies peacefully, surrounded by family, but she dies never knowing what happened to Luis. She spent 69 years searching for her son, and she never got the answer she desperately needed. Her death is heartbreaking for the family, but in a strange way, it also renews their determination. They want to find Luis for her. They want to honor her memory by solving the mystery that consumed her life. Roger is in his 80s now, but he hasn't given up. He continues to search, though the odds seem impossibly long. How do you find someone who's been missing for 70 years? How do you even know if they're still alive? But Roger refuses to stop trying. He owes it to Luis. He owes it to their mother. He owes it to himself. Roger's niece, A woman now in her 60s decides to take up the search with renewed vigor. She's heard the story of Uncle Luis her entire life. She's seen the pain it caused her grandmother, the guilt it caused her father. She's determined to find answers if it's the last thing she does. She starts researching online, spending hours every day looking through missing persons databases, reading about cold cases, learning about genetic genealogy and how it's been used to solve decades-old mysteries. She learns about companies like Ancestry.com and 23andMe, which offer consumer DNA testing. People submit a saliva sample, and the company analyzes their DNA, providing information about their ancestry and ethnicity. But these services also have another feature. They can connect you with genetic relatives. If someone else in their database shares DNA with you, the system will identify them as a potential cousin, sibling, parent, or other relation. This feature has been used to solve numerous cold cases. Genetic genealogists have used public DNA databases to identify suspects in murder cases and to identify unidentified remains. The most famous example is the Golden State Killer case, where a man who committed dozens of rapes and murders in the 1970s and 80s was finally caught in 2018 through genetic genealogy. Investigators uploaded crime scene DNA to a public database and found distant relatives of the killer. By building out family trees and following the branches, they eventually identified the suspect. Roger's niece realizes this same technology could potentially help find Luis. Even if Luis himself has never taken a DNA test, if any of his descendants have, they would show up as genetic matches to the Albino family. It's a long shot, but it's worth trying. In early 2024, she orders a DNA testing kit. When it arrives, she follows the instructions carefully, providing her saliva sample and mailing it back to the company. Then, she waits. The processing takes several weeks. Every day she checks the website, hoping to see that her results are ready. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, she gets an email notification. Her DNA results are available. She logs into her account, her hands shaking with anticipation. The first thing she looks at is the relative matches. The system has identified several people who share DNA with her. Some are expected, distant cousins she knows about, relatives on various branches of the family tree. But then she sees something that makes her heart stop. There's a close match. Someone the system identifies as a first cousin or closer relative. But the name attached to this profile isn't one she recognizes. She's never heard of this person. Who are they? How are they related to her? She clicks on the profile to get more information. The match has provided limited details, but there's enough to work with. The person is male, approximately the right age to be Luis, if he's still alive. He's listed his location as somewhere on the East Coast, which seems odd if this is supposed to be a close relative of hers, since most of her family is in California or has connections to Puerto Rico. Her mind is racing. Could this possibly be Uncle Luis? The genetic markers indicate this person is very closely related to her. The age is right. But how did a boy abducted from Oakland in 1951 end up on the East Coast with a completely different name? She needs more information. She sends a message through the DNA testing website's messaging system. She introduces herself carefully, not wanting to scare the person off but desperate for answers. She explains that she's researching her family history and noticed they share a significant amount of DNA. She asks if they'd be willing to share what they know about their family background, particularly their parents and where they grew up. Days pass without a response. She checks her messages constantly, refreshing the page obsessively. Maybe the person doesn't check their account regularly. Maybe they're not interested in connecting with genetic matches. Maybe they saw the message and decided not to respond. She tries not to lose hope, but the waiting is agonizing. Finally, after nearly a week, there's a response. The man apologizes for the delayed reply. He doesn't check his account very often. He explains that he took the DNA test, mostly out of curiosity about his ethnic background. He always knew he had some Hispanic heritage based on his appearance, but he wanted to confirm it and learn more about where his ancestors came from. He goes on to say that he was raised on the East Coast by a couple who he believed were his parents. They've both since passed away, so he can't ask them questions anymore. But looking back, he realizes there were always things that didn't quite add up. His birth certificate seemed odd, with some information that seemed incorrect or incomplete. Family photos from his early childhood were scarce. His parents would sometimes give vague or contradictory answers when he asked about his early years. He says he always felt like something was off, but he never had concrete reasons to doubt the story he was told. He assumed his parents had adopted him, perhaps, but they never explicitly said so. Now, seeing these DNA matches to people he doesn't know, he's starting to wonder if there's more to his story than he realized. He asks if she knows anything that might explain their genetic connection. Roger's niece reads this message with tears streaming down her face. This has to be Luis. Everything fits. The age, the Hispanic heritage, the East Coast location, the sense that something about his background didn't add up. She takes a deep breath and writes a careful response. She tells him about Luis Albino, the 6-year-old boy who disappeared from an Oakland park in 1951. She explains that Luis was her uncle, her father's younger brother. She sends him photos of Luis as a child and of the Albino family. She tells him about Antonia, the mother who searched for 70 years and died without knowing what happened to her son. She tells him about Roger, the big brother who has carried the guilt of that day for his entire life. She explains that the family has never stopped looking, never stopped hoping, and now, based on the DNA evidence, she believes he might be Luis Albino. She acknowledges how shocking and overwhelming this information must be. She says she understands if he needs time to process it. But she asks if he would be willing to share more information about his life, about the couple who raised him, about any memories he might have from early childhood. She also suggests that they might want to involve law enforcement to verify the match and investigate what happened. The response comes more quickly this time. The man says he's stunned, shaken to his core. He's been staring at the childhood photos she sent, and there's something hauntingly familiar about them, though he can't say why. He has very few memories from before age 7 or 8. The memories he does have are fragmented and dreamlike. He remembers Spanish being spoken, though the couple who raised him spoke only English. He remembers warm weather and palm trees, though he grew up in a colder climate. He always attributed these memories to dreams or imagination, but now he's wondering if they're actually fragments of his real early childhood. The couple who raised him told him he was born on the East Coast. They gave him a birth date that's close to Luis's actual birth date, but off by several months. Looking back now, he realizes they were always vague about the hospital where he was supposedly born, about his early medical records, about relatives from that period of his life. They had no photos of him as an infant or toddler. The earliest photos they had were from when he looked to be about 7 or 8 years old. He says he wants to know the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. If he really is Luis Albino, he needs to know. He needs to understand what happened to him. He agrees to work with law enforcement and to provide whatever additional DNA samples or information they need to verify the match. Roger's niece immediately contacts the Oakland Police Department. She explains the situation, provides all the information she's gathered, and asks them to reopen Luis's case. The detective she speaks with is skeptical at first. Cold cases from 73 years ago are notoriously difficult to solve, and most leads turn out to be dead ends. But when she explains about the DNA match and the information the man has provided, the detective's attitude changes. This could actually be legitimate. The police department assigns a detective to investigate. They pull the old case file from 1951, dusty and yellowed with age. The detective reads through the original reports, the witness statements, the descriptions of what Luis was wearing that day. He looks at the old photographs of Luis as a 6-year-old and compares them to recent photos of the man on the East Coast. There are similarities, certainly, though it's hard to be sure when comparing a child's face to an elderly man's face. The detective contacts the man and arranges for him to provide a DNA sample through official channels. This sample will be compared against DNA from Roger and other members of the Albino family. The testing takes several weeks, but when the results come back, they're definitive. The genetic markers prove beyond any reasonable doubt that this man is Luis Albino, the boy who disappeared from that Oakland park in 1951. The news spreads quickly through the family. Roger receives a phone call from his niece, telling him what they've discovered. At first, he can't believe it. After 73 years, after a lifetime of searching and wondering and grieving, his little brother has been found. Luis is alive. He's not just alive. He's lived a full life. Unaware of his true identity, Roger breaks down in tears. The relief, the joy, the grief for all the lost years, the guilt that never went away, it all comes flooding out. His wife holds him as he sobs. They've found Luis. After all this time, they've actually found him. But the joy is bittersweet. Their mother isn't here to see it. She died just 4 years earlier, never knowing that her son was alive. If only the DNA match had happened sooner. If only they'd thought to do this testing earlier. But Roger pushes those thoughts away. What matters is that Luis has been found. What matters is that they can finally know the truth. The detective continues to investigate, trying to piece together what happened to Luis after he was taken from that park. The couple who raised him on the East Coast are both deceased, so they can't be questioned. But the detective digs through public records, looking for information about them. What he discovers paints a troubling picture. The woman matches the general description of the woman seen leaving the park with Luis that day. She was in her early 30s in 1951. The right age. She had no children of her own. According to records, she and her husband moved from California to the East Coast shortly after Luis disappeared. The timing is too coincidental to be ignored. Birth records for the boy they raised as their son show inconsistencies and irregularities. The birth certificate appears to have been falsified or obtained through fraudulent means. It's a common tactic used by child abductors. Create false documentation to give the appearance of legitimacy. In the 1950s, before computerized databases and strict security measures, it was relatively easy to obtain false birth certificates if you knew the right channels. The detective theorizes about what happened, based on the evidence. The woman who took Luis was likely suffering from some form of psychological distress. Perhaps she'd lost a child and couldn't cope with the grief. Perhaps she was unable to have children and became desperate. Whatever her motivation, she saw Luis in that park and made a decision that would change multiple lives forever. She approached him, gained his trust, and led him away. She likely had a car waiting nearby. Within minutes, they were gone from the area. She probably left Oakland that same day, knowing that once Luis was reported missing, the police would be looking for them. She and her husband fled to the East Coast, as far from California as they could get while staying in the continental United States. They settled in a new community where nobody knew them. They presented Luis as their son, using whatever false documentation they'd obtained. They likely told Luis a story to explain why he had fragmented memories of a different life. Maybe they said he'd been very sick as a young child, and his memories were confused because of that. Maybe they said he'd been adopted, and his early memories were from foster care. Whatever story they told, Luis was young enough that eventually he accepted it. As Luis grew up in this new environment, his memories of his life before the abduction faded. He learned to speak English as his primary language, though somewhere deep in his mind, Spanish remained. He went to school, made friends, lived the life of a normal American child. His adoptive parents, if we can call them that, treated him well enough. They fed him, clothed him, sent him to school. From the outside, they appeared to be a normal family. But they were living a lie. They'd stolen a child and robbed him of his true identity, his real family, his heritage. They robbed Antonia of her son, Roger of his brother, and Luis of his entire childhood. Whether the woman who took him felt guilty about this, whether she ever considered returning him or contacting his family, we'll never know. She took those secrets to her grave. Luis grew into adulthood never knowing the truth. He finished school, perhaps went to college, got a job, maybe got married, and had children of his own. He lived a complete life, building relationships and creating memories, all while unaware that somewhere in California, a family was desperately searching for him. He had no idea that he had a brother who never stopped feeling guilty for losing him. He had no idea that his mother had spent her entire life searching for him, never giving up hope even as decades passed. Now, in 2024, Luis must confront the reality that everything he thought he knew about his early life is false. The people he called mom and dad weren't his real parents. They were strangers who stole him from his family. His name isn't what he thought it was. His birthday might be different than what he celebrated all these years. His entire origin story is a fabrication. The psychological impact of this discovery is enormous. Luis has spent 73 years living one life, only to discover he was meant to live a completely different one. He has to grapple with complex, conflicting emotions, anger at the people who took him and lied to him, grief for the family he never got to know, confusion about his own identity. Who is he really? Is he the person he's been for the past 73 years, or is he Luis Albino, the lost boy from Oakland? At the same time, he has to figure out how to build relationships with his biological family. These are people who share his DNA, who are connected to him by blood, but they're also strangers. He doesn't know them, and they don't really know him. They know the 6-year-old Luis who disappeared, but that child is gone, replaced by the man he became. Can they bridge that gap? Can they create meaningful connections after so many years apart? The family arranges to meet. It's decided that Roger should be the first to see Luis in person. Roger travels to the East Coast, his heart pounding with anticipation and anxiety. What do you say to the brother you lost 73 years ago? How do you even begin that conversation? Roger has imagined this moment for his entire life, but now that it's actually happening, he feels completely unprepared. They meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe, where they can talk privately. Roger arrives early, too nervous to sit still. He paces outside, checking his watch every few minutes. And then he sees him. An elderly man walking toward the cafe, looking just as nervous as Roger feels. Their eyes meet. And even after all these years, even though Luis is now an old man, Roger recognizes something in his face. That's his little brother. That's Luis. They stand facing each other for a moment, neither quite knowing what to do. And then Roger opens his arms, and Luis steps into the embrace. They hold each other, both men crying, releasing decades of pain and loss and longing. No words are needed in this moment. The hug says everything. When they finally sit down to talk, the conversation is halting at first. There's so much to say that neither knows where to begin. Roger tells Luis about their mother, about how she never stopped searching, never stopped hoping. He shows Luis photos of Antonia, of the family, of the life Luis should have had. Luis looks at these pictures of a woman he doesn't remember, a woman who loved him so fiercely that she dedicated her entire life to finding him. He feels a profound sense of loss for what might have been. Roger tells Luis about that day in the park, about how he's carried the guilt all these years. Luis is quick to assure him that it wasn't his fault. He was just a child himself. There was nothing he could have done differently. The woman who took Luis was determined, and she would have found a way no matter what. Roger has held onto this guilt for 7 decades, and hearing his brother absolve him brings a measure of peace. Luis shares what he remembers of his life. He talks about the people who raised him, and he admits it's complicated. They lied to him, yes. They stole him from his family. But they also raised him, cared for him, and shaped him into the person he became. He can't simply dismiss them or pretend they didn't matter to him. His feelings about them are complex and contradictory, and he's still processing it all. Over the following weeks and months, Luis begins to build relationships with his extended family. He meets nieces and nephews, cousins, relatives he never knew existed. They welcome him warmly, eager to include him in the family after all these years. They share stories about Antonia, helping Luis understand the woman who was his mother. They tell him about Puerto Rican traditions and family history, connecting him to a heritage he was cut off from. Luis also begins to recover some of his early memories. With the truth now known, fragments that were buried in his subconscious start to surface. He remembers a woman with a kind face, calling him in Spanish. He remembers playing with another boy, someone bigger than him. He remembers a park, the feeling of sand between his fingers. These memories have been there all along, locked away, dismissed as dreams or imagination. Now he understands they're real, pieces of his stolen childhood. The media picks up the story, and it becomes national news. Major networks cover it. Newspapers run feature articles. It's framed as a miracle, a feel-good story about a family reunited after 73 years. People are amazed that DNA technology could solve a case this old. It sparks renewed interest in other cold cases, other missing children whose families have been searching for decades. But for Luis and his family, it's not just a headline. It's their life. It's the resolution of a tragedy that shaped multiple generations. Roger can finally lay down the burden of guilt he's carried since he was 10 years old. Luis can finally know the truth about who he is and where he came from. The family can finally have closure, even if it comes far too late for Antonia to be part of it. The case also raises broader questions about missing children and the limitations of the systems designed to find them. In 1951, the resources and technology available to investigate kidnappings were primitive by today's standards. There was no way to instantly alert the entire region that a child was missing. There were no security cameras to review, no DNA databases to search. The woman who took Luis was able to disappear relatively easily because the infrastructure to stop her simply didn't exist. Even today, with all our advanced technology, children still go missing. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, hundreds of thousands of children are reported missing in the United States every year. Most are found quickly, runaways, or misunderstandings. But some aren't. Some cases remain unsolved for years or decades. Some children are never found. Luis's case is extraordinary because of how long he was missing and because he was eventually found. But it's also a reminder of all the cases that haven't been solved. All the families still searching, still hoping, still waiting for the phone call or the knock on the door that will change everything. Every one of those families is living the nightmare that the Albinos lived for 73 years. The story also highlights the power of persistence and hope. Antonia Albino never gave up. For 69 years, until her death, she continued to search for her son. Roger never gave up. Even in his 80s, he was still looking for ways to find his brother. Their niece never gave up, deciding to try DNA testing, even though the odds of success seemed impossibly small. And that persistence paid off. If they'd given up, if they'd accepted that Luis was gone forever, he would have died never knowing the truth about who he was. There's also a cautionary element to this story. The woman who took Luis was able to raise him as her own for decades without anyone questioning it. She created false documents, moved to a new area, and built a life based on a lie. This was easier in the 1950s than it would be today, but it's still possible. Children are still being trafficked, still being held by people who have no right to them. How many others are out there, living under false identities, unaware of their true origins? For Luis personally, the path forward is complicated. He's in his late 70s now, living the final chapters of his life. He has to decide how to integrate this new information into his existing identity. Does he legally change his name back to Luis Albino? Does he start going by Luis with his new family while keeping his assumed name in his old life? There's no rule book for this situation. He also has to deal with practical matters. If he has children or grandchildren, they need to be told the truth about their heritage. His family tree has fundamentally changed. People he thought were his grandparents weren't related to him at all. His real relatives are in California, Puerto Rico, and scattered across the country. The people he thought were cousins aren't. The family medical history he thought he knew is wrong. There are legal considerations too. The woman who abducted him is dead, so she can't face criminal charges. Her husband, if he was complicit, is also dead. But there may be questions about Luis's legal documents, his citizenship status, his benefits and records that were all based on false information. These bureaucratic tangles will take time to sort out. But beyond all the practical complications, there's the emotional reality. Luis has a family now. A real, biological family who loves him and wants him in their lives. Roger, despite being in his 80s, is overjoyed to have his brother back. He introduces Luis to his children and grandchildren. They spend time together, making up for lost decades. They can't get back the 73 years they lost, but they can make the most of whatever time they have left. The family holds a memorial service for Antonia, honoring her memory and her relentless search for her son. Luis is there, meeting the woman who was his mother through photos and stories. He places flowers on her grave and silently thanks her for never giving up. He wishes he could have met her, wishes she could have lived just a few more years to see this day. But he finds comfort in believing that somehow, wherever she is, she knows. She knows that Luis was found. She knows that her decades of searching finally paid off. The extended family embraces Luis fully. They include him in family gatherings, holidays, celebrations. They're patient with him as he learns about his heritage, about Puerto Rican culture and traditions he was cut off from. They teach him Spanish words and phrases he once knew but forgot. They cook traditional foods and share family recipes. They're rebuilding the connections that were severed that day in 1951. Luis also reconnects with the neighborhood where he was born. He travels to Oakland and visits the park on Brush Street where he was taken. It's changed significantly in 73 years. The playground equipment is different. The neighborhood has evolved. But standing there, Luis feels a strange sense of familiarity, like an echo of a memory he can't quite grasp. This is where his life changed forever. This is ground zero for the tragedy that affected so many people for so many years. Local media in Oakland covers Luis's return. Older residents remember when he disappeared, remember seeing Antonia's flyers, remember the story being talked about in the community. They're amazed that he's been found after all this time. Some come out to meet him, to welcome him back to the neighborhood. It's a moment of closure for the entire community, not just the family. The case inspires others who have missing loved ones to try DNA testing. Several cold cases are reopened based on genetic genealogy. Families who had given up hope start to believe again that maybe, just maybe, their missing person could be found too. Luis's story proves that it's never too late, that even after 73 years, the truth can come out. Experts in missing persons cases study Luis's case, trying to understand what allowed him to be found after so long. The key factors were the preservation of family connections, the willingness to try new technology, and the detective work of his niece in following up on the DNA match. But there was also an element of luck. If Luis's adoptive family had settled in a different region, if they'd been more careful about covering their tracks, if Luis had never felt curious enough to take a DNA test, he might never have been identified. The fact that everything aligned perfectly is almost miraculous. As Luis settles into his new reality, he reflects on his life with a perspective few people ever have. He lived one complete life, with its own joys and sorrows, successes and failures, relationships and experiences. And now, he's been given a second chance to know where he really came from, to understand his true origins. Both lives are real. Both are part of who he is. He's the man he became through his experiences, and he's also Luis Albino, the boy from Oakland. Roger and Luis spend as much time together as they can. They're making up for lost time, though they know they'll never get back those 73 years. They look through old family photos together. Roger tells Luis stories about their mother, about what she was like, about her strength and determination. Luis listens, trying to form a mental picture of the woman who loved him so fiercely. They also talk about that day in the park. Roger finally shares all the details he's kept inside for so long, how they were playing, how he got distracted, how he turned around, and Luis was gone, how he searched everywhere, panic rising in his chest, how he ran home to tell their mother, how he's relived that moment thousands of times over the decades, always wondering if there was something different he could have done. Luis listens to his brother's confession and reaches out to take his hand. "You were 10 years old," he says. "Just a child yourself. There was nothing you could have done. The woman who took me, she planned it. She was an adult, and I was 6. You couldn't have stopped her." It's something Roger has needed to hear for 73 years. The forgiveness his brother offers finally allows him to begin forgiving himself. They make a pact to stay in close contact for however long they both live. Weekly phone calls, regular visits, being present for each other's milestones and for the ordinary moments too. They're brothers, and they're determined to act like it, even if they missed most of their lives together. It's never too late to have a relationship with your family. The story of Luis Albino's disappearance and discovery is ultimately one of hope prevailing over despair, of persistence overcoming impossible odds, of love that refuses to die, even after 73 years. It's a testament to the power of family bonds, the resilience of the human spirit, and the way technology can bring closure to even the coldest of cases. For every family with a missing loved one, this story is a reminder not to give up hope, not to stop searching, not to accept that you'll never know the truth. Because sometimes, against all odds, miracles do happen. Sometimes the lost are found. Sometimes families torn apart are brought back together. And for the rest of us, it's a reminder of how fragile life can be, how quickly everything can change. A sunny afternoon in a park, a moment of distraction, and a child is gone. It happened to the Albino family, and it could happen to anyone. We must be vigilant, protective, and aware. We must look out for each other's children, because every child is someone's precious son or daughter. Luis Albino's story reminds us that identity is complex. We are shaped by our experiences, by the people who raise us, by the choices we make, and the circumstances we encounter. But we're also shaped by our origins, our genetics, our heritage. Luis is both the man he became and the boy he was born to be. He contains multitudes. We all do. This case also demonstrates the incredible advances in forensic science and genealogy. Tools that didn't exist even 20 years ago are now solving cases from decades or even centuries past. The Golden State Killer, caught after 40 years. John and Jane Does, finally given their names back. And now Luis Albino, found after 73 years. The future will bring even more advances, even more cases solved, even more families reunited. As we close this incredible story, we're left with a mixture of emotions. Joy that Luis was found, sadness for all the years lost, grief that Antonia didn't live to see it, relief that Roger can finally let go of his guilt, wonder at the odds that had to align for this to happen, and hope that other families still searching will also get their miracles. Luis Albino was 6 years old when a stranger took his hand and led him away from a park in Oakland. He's 79 years old now, finally reunited with the family that never stopped searching for him. His story is extraordinary, but it's also a reminder of the thousands of ordinary families dealing with extraordinary pain. Every missing person is someone's child, someone's sibling, someone's loved one. Every unsolved case represents a family in anguish, waiting for answers. If you've stayed with us through this entire story, thank you. This is exactly the kind of deep dive into real cases that we do here at Untold Case Desk. If you found this story compelling, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover these important stories. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on this incredible case. And make sure you're subscribed to Untold Case Desk with notifications turned on, because we have many more unbelievable true crime stories to share with you. Remember, this isn't just entertainment. These are real people, real families, real tragedies, and sometimes, real miracles. Luis Albino's 73-year journey from that Oakland park to his reunion with his family is proof that sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction, and that hope, no matter how unlikely, is always worth holding on to. Until next time, stay safe, look out for each other, and never give up on the people you love. This has been Untold Case Desk, and this was the astonishing true story of the boy who vanished and was found 7 decades later.